Good evening and welcome to Environment Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page on the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So that's the formal bit of it, of the things you need to know. We're going to move on, first of all, to appointment of substitutes.
Yes, Chair. This evening we have Councillor De Serra for Councillor Udall and Councillor Mace for Councillor Sobchak. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Mace.
I'm co-chair of Worcester Canal Group, which is mentioned in the allotments report.
Thank you. Councillor Lewin.
I'm also the co-chair of the Canal Group.
So we have both chairs of the Canal Group then. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. We do have a very busy agenda tonight and we have 4 members of the public who've come to speak to us. Normally we would cap that at just 3 members, but we did feel it's important and it's very welcome to have members of the public here. So Karen and I did use Chair's prerogative to say that we were happy for 4 people to come. Therefore, to ensure that we're not here all the evening, I'm going to make the assumption that members have in detail read the papers, and therefore I'm going to ask officers to keep their introductions to their reports as short as possible and work on the assumption that those papers have been read. I would also ask elected members to be as succinct as possible and to avoid repeating themselves or other members. Hopefully that's going to be helpful. So we're going to move on to public participation, and I'd like to invite Bertie Ballinger to come forward, and he wishes to ask us some questions on environmental issues, and particularly in relation to Lornbrook.
Thank you, Chair, that's correct. First of all, I'd like to thank yourself and members of the committee for letting me speak this evening on the environmental issues in Worcester and those close to my home. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Udall, who isn't present, for offering an invitation to the Environment Agency. However, I understand they are not present this evening. As a member of the community, I have become more active in local environmental issues, and through my work with the Friends of Lornbrook Local Nature Reserve, I have seen firsthand the issues that the Brook and Worcester Nature Reserve face. I am humbled by the work that others are doing and excited for a chance to do my part. I was appalled to read about the unchecked damage that has been done to the Lornbrook in recent years, through neglect of safety features from the Elizabeth the Chef factory, to sewage discharge from the Severn Trent, and multiple other issues. I used to play in the brook as a child and never saw it in such a bad condition, and seeing it in its current state saddens me. I am hoping that lending my voice to that of councillors about these issues will show that there is a backing of the local communities for the council to take action to protect our waterways and nature reserves. It is not just that our waterways have become polluted, but that a city nature reserve is flooded with raw sewage, 33 hours worth in one day from 2 separate sewage discharge stations that connect to the Lornbrook. The nature reserve in general has shown improvements in its health, but the brook that it takes its name from is in a poor condition and needs help. From a community's perspective, I've been active in getting the word out. Residents need to see the problems and need to know that their voices matter and they can have an impact. Through organising the Environment Agency and Severn Trent River Trust to do a talk with citizen science, I've been able to inspire local residents into action. The Friends of Lornbrook are also excited about having our first Duke of Edinburgh Award volunteer who came to help with some tree planting. We hope that more young people begin volunteering with us, and this, along with our Friends of Friends group, aim to connect communities with nature. We ask that we are giving more support from the City Council regarding this, as it helps the city reach its own aims and objectives. Further to our work, I hope that this council adds more emphasis on the Lornbrook Local Nature Reserve through the upcoming Worcestershire Local Nature Reserve strategy, so that there is a framework in place to help regenerate the health of the Lornbrook. With a strategy in place, the council will be able to organise volunteers in the Environment Agency for the betterment of the brook. This is where the real work can begin to push forward with a nature recovery network and prioritise our Lornbrook. I did have a lot of other questions, but then you released all the documents for this meeting and they were all answered. So I only have one final question, which, so you all know about, is the benches that we currently have. If the community wishes to purchase benches, they have to do so through the bereavement service at a cost of over £1,000 for a bench you can buy online for £200. I know there are some installation costs, but I was wondering if the council would look into why only the bereavement service is the only option available to people to buy benches through. This doesn't just come from myself asking people. We've had chairs of other committees ask the question, and every time it comes back, the bereavement service is the only option. Our local councillor Tor had to purchase a bench at over £1,000 as well, and then we weren't consulted on where it was put, so it was put in the wrong place, facing the wrong way, and we liked everything being natural and local, and there were 2 concrete slabs put down, so it didn't really help appease the area. That's everything, so thank you all for your time, and I look forward to some questions being answered.
Thank you very much. Some really interesting questions. You will get a written answer with regard to those, so thank you. And we're going to move on to Pauline Burgess.
I'm here because of the 2 birds that suffered and died hanging in netting on St Andrew's Spire. Bearing in mind that when birds become trapped behind or in netting installations, the property owner must be aware that the welfare of those birds then becomes their responsibility. If the trapped birds suffer or die as a result of being trapped, a prosecution may be brought for causing unnecessary suffering under the 2006 Animal Welfare Act. Similarly, if birds' nests are enclosed by netting installations, denying the birds access to their young, a prosecution can be brought under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. Netting should never just be repaired due to the fact the integrity of the system depends on tension. With this in mind, will the City Council be regularly checking netting on its buildings? And when netting needs to be replaced, as is going to be done on St Andrew's Spire, will the Council consider using metal mesh instead of plastic netting, making sure the product installers do not trap birds behind when installing it? Although this stronger metal mesh will be more expensive, it should last longer, need less maintenance, and prevent future bird and animal casualties.
Thank you, Pauline. Again, you will get a formal written answer. We're going to now move on to Jessica, who I think wants to talk on the same subject.
Good evening. The previous speaker has said some of what I was going to say and has set the picture. So I just have a few questions, please, for the Council. The first question, which sites other than St Andrew's Spire, which the Council is responsible for, have netting in which birds or bats could get caught? My next question, is the Council aware of the legal requirements once a wild animal becomes a captive animal by being trapped? I think the previous speaker alluded to that as well. The third question, what steps are the Council going to take to ensure that any danger to birds and bats is removed now? I understand that the Council knew about the damaged netting on St Andrew's Spire several months before the birds were got caught and died. I know that installing replacement netting may take a while, but the damaged netting should be taken down. My next question, in particular, when will the rest of the dangerous netting be removed from St Andrew's Spire? Some of it's been taken down, but not all of it. And my last question, will the Council place notices on all sites, all relevant sites, giving details of a 24-hour contacts in case of trapped animals? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always hard at these committees to resist actually giving an answer straight away, but you will make sure that you get a full answer and in writing. We're now going to move on to Chris Thorpe, who is here to talk about allotments.
Good evening. I'll start again. I'd like to make a few comments about the allotments, tenants, disputes and complaints policy. I think you've all seen a link to that, to its presence on the council website. I hope some of you had to look at it. I had planned to review the shortcomings of this policy, such as the right for complainants to remain anonymous, with the defendants apparently having no rights at all in what might have been seen as a prosecutor's charter designed to prove the allegations. However, I now gather that Sian Stroud is to bring forward the next review of the policy following such concerns having been raised with her about it in its present form. Having had a personal uncomfortable exposure to it and its workings, I'd like to propose, in order to put it all into context, that any revised versions contain a clear explanation of the entire process, step by step, from start to ultimate finish. This to include such currently obscure matters as the role of the initial investigating officer, what all parties can expect at the initial investigation, what happens next, for example, a disclosure of evidence, what happens at a hearing, the role of the hearing officer, how the parties are engaged in the hearing, what happens next, and so on until a final decision is arrived at, and then total clarity on how to instigate an appeal by either party and the grounds for such an appeal, how that would work out, submission of new evidence, and so on, all entirely obscure at the present time. As things stand, we Communal Garden, Clotthopper allotment plot holders find this a daunting experience, largely due to a complete ignorance of the process we've become embroiled in. The site coordinators, which replace the site reps, are now regarded as council representatives, and some have been known to claim undefined authority to say, act, or do things on behalf of the council. My understanding is they have none. However, confirmation is sought that they in fact have no such powers or authority, or, if the contrary, for that to be spelled out. Requests for clarification have been submitted and responses are awaited. If we can achieve all that, it will help build better relationships between the city staff, its representatives, and its allotment tenants. Moving on to the site coordinators election protocol, we've recently had one on our site at Northwick Road. Notice of the statements by the candidates, together with voting papers, was meant to be sent to all tenants on site. This appears to have been done except for the candidates themselves, who've been unadvised of the other candidates' details or statements, and in fact get no vote. Isn't it a bit unusual for candidates not to be able to vote? And I don't believe that could be right in our form of democracy, can it? And then finally, allotments, vacancies and waiting lists. Again, I refer you to the council's website for the current numbers. But I think that some of the practical focus on a day-to-day basis has been wrong, and it needs to be on the vacant plots, which is where the council stands to lose revenue. For example, at the end of November, I believe there are 129 vacant plots, down to 107 at the end of December. That's out of around about 1,000 in total. And allowing for full plots, half plots and concessions and so on, I'd estimate that the loss in revenue is around £7,500, which I would have thought we could ill afford. Allegedly, the waiting lists are considerably longer than the vacancy lists, so it poses the obvious question. The most important thing about the waiting list is that it is long enough to fill all the vacancies on a site. However, currently that is not so on some 4 or 5 sites where there are more vacancies than people on the waiting list. New applicants need to be sought, and believe it or not, promotion of allotments to seek applicants for plots is required within the city, at least I believe so. The waiting list itself should simply sort itself out as the site coordinators work their way through letting the vacant plots. In my time on Northwick Road, we rarely had more than 1 vacant plot for a few days. We've virtually always had full occupancy, and that is not the current state on other sites. If there aren't enough waiters, revenue loss becomes inevitable, and I believe that engagement by the allotment service in the Worcester show is one means of helping promote the service and ensure full occupation of all plots at all times, or as closely as possible. I believe that's highly desirable. I think you will agree, so I would ask you please to help encourage this. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And again, you will get a detailed answer to all of those, but I'm sure members will have been listening and bearing that in mind for the discussion that's coming later on in the meeting.
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank all the public speakers for coming and taking the time tonight, and also for the quite intimidating task of presenting to committee. It's very much appreciated. You are very welcome to stay for the rest of the committee. You're equally welcome to slip out now or at any point during proceedings. So if you want to stay for a bit and then escape, that's fine if you want to leave now. And if you want to stay right to the end, we're hoping we won't be here all evening. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the minutes. Rather than going through page by page, I'm going to ask, has anybody got any comments on the minutes? Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to follow up something actually that was in the minutes. It said that officers were going to prepare a short briefing note containing general advice about the nuisance caused by burning waste. I don't know whether I've missed this or whether we just haven't got it yet, or in what format it was sent or is, so that people can find it. Thank you.
Chair, that's not been missed, and I'll pick that up with WRS to follow that one up. So apologies to members for not having put that out.
Do we have any other comments on the minutes or amendments or matters arising? If not, I'm going to take those as read and sign those off, and we'll move on to item 5, which is the Q3 performance report, which I assume is going to Sandra, but as I said at the start of the meeting, we're not expecting officers to talk at length to their reports. We are going to assume that people have actually read them.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will keep this brief. I just want to draw our attention to the fact that this particular quarter has been quite problematic. With storms, we've had, as you'll hear later from the Ash Dieback report, over 400 hours having to recuperate from the storm damage. So that has put some significant pressures within the team, and we've got quite a significant backlog. We've also seen, and we're seeing this year on year, increasing in flooding, which, as you know, is quite an intensive piece of work to try and get the paths clean and open as soon as possible, as soon as the water starts to recede, so that the city can, and the residents can enjoy the city and walk along the riverside path. In particular, now we've got Cape Axe Bridge open, it's quite imperative that we try and keep on top of that. Some members will be aware we are also trialling some new kit to try and minimise the workforce cleaning the floods, and also to try and speed the process up so that we can get the paths open as quickly as possible. So I think some of the reds that you've seen on the scorecard is really down to the impact of the storms and the floods that we've seen over the last this quarter. I do want to also draw attention to, I think, the recycling and the waste figures. We have said that we will look at a pilot around that recycling, increasing the recycling rate and reducing the contamination. But the efforts of the team for this last quarter has been around rebranding the trade waste, because we've got food waste coming online 31st of March for larger businesses within 10 employees or more. So that has taken up a lot of the time from the waste and recycling team, but that is something that we will still keep on the radar, and is something that we intend to pick up in the new financial year once we start getting moving with the trade waste. So on that, I'll leave it there, and if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you.
We're going to go first to Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed about the public bin investment programme has been delayed because of street nameplates. I would like to say a very big thank you for that work. Those Hardy Padmore signs are part of our heritage and our placemaking, and they have, it's quite a lot to restore them, but they're making our city look beautiful, and I'm getting so many compliments from residents. So I just wanted to formally say thank you. I know I've said it privately. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I think everyone understands the pressure that we've been under with floods and with recovery from those, and I'm pleased that the work's ongoing to keep the footpaths clear. On recycling, though, I think I've offered to you before that there was a residents' association, at least one, who was very keen to be involved in helping push things forward, and please bear that in mind as you take forward the next bit of promotion of inevitable changes to our recycling pattern.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we have got details and we will be getting in touch because I think that would be quite a good area to start working with from the recycling point of view. So we've also got a new waste supervisor that started with us just before Christmas. So hopefully we can get back on track to some of the projects that we want to look at. But yes, we will bear that in mind, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. It's unfortunate to have to say that I think recycling in my ward is a big problem. I don't know what might be proposed to try and encourage people to do the right thing there. Every one of the housing association bins that go past is rammed with things that are not recyclable. So it's a plea, really. Can we get some concerted effort to? I've done walkabouts with leaflets and bags and things with the City Council team, communities team. Is there something else we can do?
I think as part of the project, that'll be something we're picking up, and it'll be a bit of a twin track. We'll be looking at the education, but also the enforcement side as well that we'll be picking up. So that's what we'll start with, a small pilot, and look at lessons learned, and then try and roll that out across the other areas. So yeah.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. In an earlier council meeting, we spoke about QR codes and other identification on bins, and just would love to hear when this might be happening, please.
Yes, Councillor. Again, it's gone on my list of to-dos. I do apologise, and I think I apologised at the last meeting, but this is something that I am keen, because it's quite vital in identifying which bins we need to get emptied. So I will give you an assurance that and you know I under-promise and overachieve, I will give you an assurance by June committee we will have started the process, if not completed it.
I don't think we have anyone else wanting to speak on this. I just wanted to thank officers for their openness at admitting that the trial of cleaning the riverside wasn't as successful as it would have liked to have been. As an elected member, it was very nice to be able to go back to members of the public and be able to explain that so people understood. And I actually had one resident from one part of the city come back to me and said they really appreciated that openness. They appreciated that we were trying to protect staff as well as ensure that we kept up the standards, and she really appreciated that level of explanation. Clearly still work to do to make sure that we reach the standards and protect the staff, but I think that openness of that dialogue is really appreciated by the members of the public. Okay, so if we're happy to have noted the performance report, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is setting the budget. And I believe that, Sal, I don't know whether you're speaking or we're going straight to Cathy. We're going straight to Cathy, who actually is going to be joining us in all technological way by video link. The joys of technology. Okay, in the absence of technology, I obviously jinxed it by saying that. We're going to turn to Sal, who's going to present this report. Fortunately, we're taking the approach of people should have read this in detail, so so we don't actually need you to formally report to say a lot about it, other than what we're looking for members to do, and then we can go straight to questions.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second stage in setting the budget for 25-26 and the MTFP up to 2029-30. We're asking the committee to note the proposed budgets for the various services identified for 25-26 and for the committee to consider priorities within each service and to recommend any changes for those services' budgets. And we're also asking the committee to consider any service, any of the services capital programme and future projects, and to recommend any changes or additions, and that the committee reviews any new budget proposals from members and to make any recommendations to the Policy and Resources Committee as appropriate. The summary budgets for 25-26 are contained in Appendix 1. The overall MTFP is shown as Appendix 3 and the capital programme is identified in Appendix 2, Chair. So keeping it succinct, I'll hand back to you for questions.
Thank you. I think we're potentially going to go to Councillor Rudge first, particularly in relation to the item in 4.5.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you should have in front of you this map, which I hope will kind of illustrate the point that I want to make. The Y2 is one of the ponds of Ofton Lane Nature Reserve, and Y3 is the other. Sarah Murray and myself, as local city councillors, have invited Doug Henderson, who was the Bereavement and Green Spaces manager, and since then Fenella has been out. And they both come up with fantastic suggestions about how to solve the problem, which is basically that both of these ponds were designed as balancing ponds or filtration ponds. They had two jobs, both to sort of cope with excess water from flooding or heavy downpours, whatever, and also to filter water with reed beds so that it goes into Barbourne Brook cleaned. Brilliant idea, and a tremendous amount of design and planning had gone into this. If you have a look at it, when you see the ditches running through, you can see at the bottom housing phase 1, housing phase 2. This is water that's coming off the residential areas and also coming off the roads from the commercial areas there, and some of it's very dirty, and I thought had a brilliant plan of having these filtration ponds that clean the water. In 2000, the Worcestershire Wildlife Trust did a survey and said, you need to put in silt traps because the water that's coming in is just slowly, silting up both ponds, and that's what's happened. Y2 now, that pond on the right, the east, is basically there's 5 square metres of clear water left, and the rest is a swampy mess. If you go there, the only thing you like to meet is a mosquito. It is really, really unpleasant. When you look later at Tim's report on biodiversity, you'll see that he mentions things like sedge warblers and reed warblers, reed buntings. There was a fantastic array of biodiversity and wildlife there when they were originally put in. The only thing I've seen since I've been working on it with Worcestershire Environment Group over 2 days is a kingfisher, which is something, but it's not a lot. He also mentioned swans. There are no swans there anymore because there's no water to land in. And I think that's a very, very, very serious neglect on the part of the City Council. This, when it was put in, when I listen to people talk at planning, they always say, and maintain it for 5 years, 10 years or whatever. And we failed to maintain this for whatever reason. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but it hasn't been maintained. And now it's a mess. The Y3 pond there is about a third open water still, but most of it is swamped over, and it's smelly, it's black, dirty mud. This is the Worcestershire Way. It goes along past Y3, and it should be a beauty spot. This is meant to be a nature reserve, and it really isn't. It isn't any of those. It is a mess. You can see when you look at the top part where it goes under the canal, both of these ponds are connected with ditches. It's a very, very cleverly designed system, and the overflow goes through there once it's been cleaned into Barbourne Brook and goes on from there. So fantastic design, great set of ponds, doing a fantastic job originally. It's been neglected, and my request is that I appreciate money is very, very tight, but I think we have to, at some point, if we're serious about our environmental concerns and our biodiversity commitments, we need to say we can't just keep burying our head in the sands and letting this get worse and worse. We have to do something. My recommendation would be that we at least listen to the reports that have been put forward by Doug and Fenella, amongst others, and pursue those a little bit further. I haven't got to the bottom of the planning. Unfortunately, somebody found this for me, but I know there is a planning set of details that sort of we can look into further to talk more about the original design, but you get the idea of it anyway from that. If we do nothing, flooding continues, nothing gets cleaned, and it just it continues to be a mess, and I think we can do better than that. So my request is that we put some resources at least into initially finding the problems and then thinking about what we can do to resolve them. I'm not saying that's going to be in the next few months or whatever, but a commitment at this stage, I think, is vital. Otherwise, it's just going to be left and become worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mace indicated that he wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you. So I originally had a question on the rise in expenditure on regulatory services, but Lloyd has kindly answered that question already, that what the breakdown of that is, but 11,000 of that I think is increased NIC contributions. So the following question I had to that was, do we have an idea of what percentage of our overall budget gap of 900,000 is down to NIC increases from shared services hosted by other authorities that may come out of that later if they get reimbursed for it by the government?
I haven't got that figure to hand at this moment in time, but it's something we'll be preparing for the P&O meeting when the overall budget is considered. So it's probably more appropriate for it there, but it's something we'll be looking at anyway.
Okay, thank you.
We'll come back to Councillor Rudge's point if nobody else does, because clearly one of the things we're being is requested to make a recommendation of what's happening, and that's in the report. So, but I'm going to Councillor Lewin first.
Thank you, Chair. When I was looking at the budget, it reminded me about the funding application that we did to the government for funding various projects in the city. One of them was the Gallivelt bandstand refurbishment, and it reminded me that we've been talking about that a lot at stakeholder meetings for about 4 years. I found something in 2022 when we were getting quotes done, and I'm just wondering whether, if the funding doesn't come through from anywhere else, could it be a consideration that we look at what we can do to do something to that bandstand, because it is listed. I know that we've had some trees removed from it, but is there something that we could do to stop it further deteriorating until we do get any funding that we need to do the job properly, if that is the problem? And I know this is something that our surveying and team were looking at before. Thank you. So it's just a request. Thank you.
Do we need to do anything other than note that request at this stage?
I think it's one for noting. We'll pick it up as part of service actions next year.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any other comments that they would like to make, particularly on this? I'm just very minded that we do need to go back to this amendment proposal in 4.5 and agree what's happening about that. I don't know whether any members want to say anything on that. If there's no particular comments, I'm going to go to Lloyd.
Thanks, Chair. I think I heard a budget proposal, although there was no figure attached to it. I think Councillor Rudge just sort of put the ball in the court of wider committee. We've had a conversation around Offering Lane as officers, Offering Nature Reserve. And again, I think we would agree with Councillor Rudge's point that actually we need to find out what the situation is there, what the site condition is there, both from a biodiversity point of view, a drainage point of view, and a safety point of view. And for us, I think we would propose, if committee were minded, to propose a reasonably small budget to commission that piece of work. And then that's something that we can bring back and consider to see whether there's a business case to support carrying out actual improvement works. I think we sort of consider that sort of amount to be 10, 15, 20,000 pounds. And one of the other things is that it can form part of the biodiversity strategy and action plan moving forward. But again, that will be officer advice. There are reserves available to this committee. You have delegation to be able to reallocate. But as I say, that's officer advice, but it's for members to make a decision as to whether or not they wish to proceed along that line or not.
Councillor Scott.
I think that sounds useful. I would suggest once you've a bit more information, you don't just look to the council on our stretched budgets, but start to look further afield. And I would think that the development process around that part of Worcester hasn't finished. There will be new investment, there will be new planning applications going through, and there will be opportunities to justify some planning gain money being put in, whether it's SIL or what, into supporting nearby environmental projects. The other thing, if the project's so good, there'll be an opportunity for direct private sponsorship, and if you can get a group of stakeholders making those sorts of arguments, I'm sure that there sounds like it would be a good runner.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you. I was thinking to ask this under the Ash Dieback item 9, but I notice in 3.23 of the report that there's potential costs beyond 26-27. I'm just wondering where that funding would come from. Is this something that we would have to lobby government for? So just whilst we're talking money, I thought, let's put that in there. I know it's difficult decisions to juggle everything. Thank you.
Exact questions that Councillor Lewing and I have asked of officers in our briefings with them. I don't know, Lloyd, whether you want to give the same answer that you've given to myself and Cameron.
I hope I'm going to give the same answer. So in terms of 25-26, which this report is focusing on, FEN's report will seek to sort of carry over the underspending the reserve to next year. But at present, we don't have any allocated money for Ash Dieback, so that will be something that we would bring back to committee as part of budget setting for 26-27. And the work next year will allow us to understand and identify what level of investment we may need. But at this point, we wouldn't be suggesting anything goes into the MTFP for Ash Dieback until we know more about where we are with it.
Councillor Rudge.
Councillor Cooper put a hand up. Did you have something? Then in that case, I'll talk. Thank you, Councillor Scott. I was cheeky enough to go to the rugby club and talk to the planning officers there and say, look, this is on your doorstep. A lot of your supporters are going to be walking through this area because it's the route to the rugby club. And a lot of them will be eating fast food. And a lot of them will be dropping litter from fast food. And I said, you really have an obligation to do something. This would be a perfect opportunity for you, with your biodiversity net gain, to do something in this project. And they didn't seem very keen, but I thought it's worth asking. I don't know whether there are any other credits from other, which I think Councillor Scott may be alluding to, other development projects that possibly could be used as a sort of credits that can be sold, you know, for, if that system works. I don't know.
So in terms of moving this item forward, we've noted Councillor Lewing's request for something to be given budget consideration. We've noted your request that for this item for Offerton Lane to be given budget consideration. Do we want to pick up Offerton Lane under the biodiversity discussion, or do we want to ask the biodiversity working group to build it into the action plan?
I think, Chair, probably there's a level of detail in that project that we need to do some options analysis that probably sits some way below the report I'm going to talk to shortly around our biodiversity strategy. So it's probably most appropriate to take that outside of this meeting and pick it up at a later date.
So are people comfortable that we have noted the proposed budget, that we've considered the priorities, we've noted two issues that would like to be considered for further funding? Does anybody else have anything else that they want to comment on this item at this stage? Okay, in that case, I'm going to move us on to the next item, which is the biodiversity strategy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say a few words by way of introduction. But The request is that members approve the draft for consultation throughout February and March. That's the strategy that's Appendix 1 to the report. The origin of the strategy is the Council declaring a biodiversity emergency back in 2020, which then influenced the content of our sustainability strategy, and also the Environment Act 2021, which strengthened our biodiversity as a local duty as a local authority. Just to note that Appendix 2 is the first considerations action plan required by the Act, so that doesn't sit with the biodiversity strategy. Actually, the first action within that action plan is to develop a strategy. So there's a number of pieces of work that we're doing at the moment on biodiversity. Appendix 1 is the draft strategy, which includes an executive summary. I won't go into detail. Just to say that nature recovery is a long-term series of activities. For instance, establishing a woodland is tens of years, if not scores of years. What this draft strategy looks to do is really establish a strong base from which to take further action, alongside some shorter-term priorities. So we're asking that you approve this for consultation. A detailed action plan, which would be a delivery plan for the strategy, would be developed and approved by committee alongside the final strategy when that comes back. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all keeping to being succinct tonight. I just wanted to start by thanking both members and officers who've been involved in that working group for all the work and time they put into that. It has been a considerable commitment on behalf of both members and officers on that, and I think that's why it's such a positive piece of work. Does anybody have any questions or clarifications? Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. Really relating back to my previous point, I've written to Tim to explain this, and I think it needs unpicking a little bit further. But if we're looking for an improvement, let's say by 2030 of a number of different things, and we're saying that biodiversity net gain is measurable, it's 5%, we have to start from the right baseline. And in some areas, my concern, even though I was part of the group sort of helping produce it, we didn't really have time to go into all of these things, which is why I wrote to Tim afterwards. My concern is that there are still some areas where we're not exactly accurate. So going back to my Offerton Lane thing, there are no sedge warblers or reed warblers or swans in those places. So in 2030, if we go and have a look, they still won't be there, I suspect. It won't be long enough. So we'll in fact be looking at a biodiversity net loss because we've started from the wrong baseline. So there's just a little bit of tweaking from my point of view. I know Tim can't go around to all of these places and check them out himself, but we do need to be sure that we're starting from the right baseline. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to comment on that?
I mean, we've had that discussion, Councillor, and I think that's noted. This is a fairly high-level desktop study at the moment. Part of the plan as we develop it will be how we establish the baseline from which we can measure.
Councillor De Sarah.
It's just a detail point, really. So the table, that's Appendix 2, over both sides. All the dates are either very close or in the past. Is this going to be a living thing that's monitored, or is this not part of what you'll be doing next?
So Appendix 2 is what's called the First Considerations Action Plan, which comes out of the Environment Act. Yeah. So it's not part of the biodiversity strategy. It's what informs that. So there are a number of actions that are ongoing, and we've started already. I suspect some of these will pick up and roll them forward into the action plan that sits under the biodiversity strategy. And so some will roll forward and some will be completed.
Thank you. Councillor Mace.
Thank you for the report. I think I have two questions. One with my Canal Group hat on about floating pennywort. I think there's some references in the report about work that has been done with the Canal and River Trust about Japanese knotweed in the canal, which is a problem in and of itself, but there's definitely been a spread of floating pennywort in the canal in the last year, and I know that I've personally tried to get Canal and River Trust to take action on this, as has Karen. We've not had much luck, so I'm just wondering if there's any work the City Council's done on floating pennywort with the Canal of Interest so far. And the other thing is, one thing I'm aware of that happens a lot, or has happened a lot since Stephen, is there are areas where people have front gardens, and in some places, almost all of them have been turned into parking spaces. And you can look at Google Street View and see streets that used to have beautiful nature areas outside houses with trees and all that kind of stuff, and in the last 10 years, that's all gone. Whether there's any consideration of things we can do about that as part of this biodiversity strategy to maintain those green areas where people live.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm aware of some correspondence with the Environment Agency, who are in discussion with Canal and River Trust about pennywort, an invasive species that thrives in slower moving water. So we don't have it in the Severn, but I understand the River Avon has got a problem in some areas. So yes, you councillors who've been in contact with them directly may be as appraised as I am of that, but it's something we'll continue to pick up with the Environment Agency and Canal and River Trust. And the Environment Agency are sort of the authority that are pushing that forward. So I hope to see some action on that. I've been talking to our planners recently about the issue raised about paving the front gardens. Planning legislation allows people to pave gardens provided it's either permeable or it's connected to drainage, suitable drainage. So retrospectively for existing developments, there aren't powers available to the council other than a particular direction, which planners advise will be disproportionate for something of this nature. I think perhaps something we can look at a little bit further when we come do some more work on the strategy, but right now there isn't an easy answer to that one.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I don't mind assistance on helping the strategy. At Orbital's final stages, 2 points on that. First of all, in terms of these, which I think is very well founded, something which just struck me when I was looking at the maps is picking out the natural networks are the absolutely key part of the strategy, so that there's a connectivity in our wildlife areas. And we don't adequately make reference to the periphery and the areas outside Worcester, which are, of course, the greater reservoirs of wildlife. And you can see that if you study birds at all. Out in the countryside, the best bits of the countryside, there's a whole lot of biodiversity which should be allowed and encouraged to spread into the city. But unfortunately, we're pretty well contained by major dual carriageways now. So thinking about that. So that's the general point on that. And the other context, secondly, is about the well expressed context of the SWDP and indeed other broader strategies. No, but I think what I wanted to say is that the main work will start after this. Immediately when you start looking at strategies like this, you get into detail as the two things we heard there about the Offerton and the canal. And that detailed project work, setting priorities, coming up with strategies for the individual target areas which we'll be aiming at, is going to be a very exhaustive but very necessary part of it. If you don't do that work, then it's just words in a nice strategy which gets gathering dust on a shelf. We need to turn this excellent strategy into action, and that means setting priorities and doing some work. And my final point in that is it's essential we mobilise our community. We make reference to some of the key community actors in biodiversity in the strategy, but I think you don't have to scratch hard in the gardening community to find people who are very keen on biodiversity, and mobilising the good stock of gardeners that we've got in Worcester, I think is a key thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you've got all of those noted down.
I think those are really valid points, and I suppose the particular point I'd pick up is we have a lot of land in the city, and as it says in the strategy, our aspiration there is that all of that is managed effectively with nature recovery and biodiversity in mind. That's a long list that we need to work through, I think, is the point you're making. Yeah.
And I think you make a very valid point about the importance of this becoming a living strategy that actually makes a difference and that we work to, rather than simply something that's on the shelf. We're going to go to Councillor Cooper next, and then Councillor Rudge, and then Councillor Cross. Did I see Councillor Lewin as well?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to draw your attention to page 73 in this report, which shows the light pollution in the city. I'm sure you'll agree it's quite extreme. I was wondering if on the 22nd of March, the Guildhall and other City Council buildings would turn off their lights for WWF Earth Hour between 8 and 9 p.m. and perhaps do a campaign to encourage other premises in the business and businesses in the city to also join up to it, just for 1 hour. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy to take that suggestion away and come back to members. Yeah.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you. I noticed the report talks about land owned by the council and some land which is managed by the council. And it may not be exact wording, but you get the idea. I would love to see the land that is managed by the council, particularly unadopted land, finally adopted so that we've got a little bit more freedom to do what we want to do. Planting trees, for example, I would love to plant a whole row of fruit trees along the stretch near Corfe Avenue because there's space to do it. But it's not clear whose land it is. Is it our land? Is it managed by the city? I think it is, but it doesn't own, we don't own it. It's whatever it is, Taylor Wimpey or Persimmon or something. I don't know who we need to put pressure on, but if we could put some pressure on the City Council to finally get that unadopted land issue sorted, I think we'd be in a much stronger position, personally.
Thank you, Councillor. There is an ongoing piece of work that one of our property services officers is doing, particularly around Warndon villages, with looking to adopt land. It can be a long and rather tortuous process because it requires momentum from both sides. But I know there's a piece of work that's ongoing and some progress is being made.
I said we were going to go to Councillor Cross next, so we will, and apologies to Councillor Lewing if I didn't catch your... Yeah, so you'll get to have the final say, Karen.
Thank you. Yes, I would echo that call for the land adoption process to be completed. It is a major problem in Warndon villages, so encouraging to hear that there is desire. The challenge is to make the capacity to make the unadopted land problem that's been so long established go away. Just a quick comment really about the report, which is I love seeing metrics, sort of smart targets. So who's doing what and when by. So to have that in the report, just wanted to give the kudos and say thank you for having that in there. Thank you.
So the final word goes to Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a couple of things, actually. This is brilliant, isn't it? Having a biodiversity strategy for the first time as a council, bringing together so many different strands of work that we've got, but in one place to make it really comprehensive and easy for people to look at and understand. Obviously, a lot of it will come out in the action plan. And, what other councillors were saying, that there are lots of other stakeholders as well. And the importance of data is the importance of even wider data. So, for example, we've put up Swift boxes in the Arboretum and people can report Swift sightings. If you see a hedgehog, you can report that on the hedgehog map. If you see something else, you can report it somewhere else and somewhere else, somewhere else. There's a lot out there for people to do. And I think the important thing is many eyes on this, and actually having this strategy that people can zoom in on and focus on. And maybe, they're focusing on something like, for example, the swans, which we saw the really sad news today about avian flu. Obviously, that kind of thing is also a threat to biodiversity. I think if it goes into the wild birds, particularly, I know it's with the waterborne ones, but maybe other ones as well, songbirds. So, I'm just really grateful for this report because sometimes I have to say I can feel really down and miserable about what's happening on this planet. The statistic at the start saying, the UK is the most nature depleted country in the world. I think that's utterly tragic. But thank goodness we as a city are starting to look at it. And already in those case studies, you can see the difference we have made in the past couple of years of changes that we've made in our practices. In Astwood Cemetery, the wonderful butterflies, the wildflowers on the verges, We have started, but we have just started, and there's a lot more to do. So I'd like to thank officers, thank the support of councillors on the steering group, and really encourage everybody in the community to, when this goes out for public consultation, please comment on it, submit it. If you've got more ideas or more things to say, please do it. It's one of the most important consultations I think we've had. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more comments, so I'm just going to move to a vote. Is everybody happy to approve this draft biodiversity strategy go out for consultation? Just see a show of hands. And votes in the public gallery as well, which is always nice to see. So, so I think that's approved, and we're going to move on to the annual allotment update.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep it brief. This report intends to bring members up to date with the key deliverables of the allotment service over the recent years and sets out key areas of work for 2025. I would like committee to note the contents of this report and in particular the proposed programme of management, including allotment site and plot inspections. Thank you, Chair.
So I very much briefed officers in advance to make sure we kept it succinct, and I think we're managing to do that. I'm going to start by abusing my position of chair and use the opportunity to speak first, because I just wanted to thank officers on behalf of the West Side councillors and myself as chair of committee for the detailed amount of work there is about Windsor Avenue allotments in the appendix to this report. I think having that allotment site focus is very useful to members with the number of allotments that are in there, but particularly I've personally been to Windsor Avenue twice now, and when I went in the summer I was shocked by the condition of it. It has improved slightly, there's a lot more to be done, but it's good to see the actions and the proposals of what's going to be happening. And I know myself and councillors on the West Side, where it's been a long-standing issue, will look forward to seeing those followed through. So, abusing my right to say that at the start, I'm then going to go to Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really welcome this report. I have two questions within it. Waterworks Road and Pitchcroft Lane. I'm wondering if within the year we could look at how many days, weeks those have been out of use due to flooding, climate change, and perhaps review the fees just on those two sites. I have mentioned this previously. I'm amazed there's a waiting list, and I'm really pleased there is. But, however, it doesn't seem as good value for money given that they can't use the site all year round. And also, I'm aware that sometimes the waiting list and the vacancies don't quite match up for a lot of reasons, but I'm not sure that's clear on the website. And in terms of managing residents' expectations, I think maybe just a couple of sentences about sometimes the process takes longer because we're having to wait for a site to be cleared, or you know, for whatever reason, I think would really help the public, because I think they really want to do this. We can see that there's a waiting list and there's demand, but I'd hate for people to feel disillusioned. So if we could just have something to manage residents' expectations, I think that would be really valuable. Thank you very much.
Recognising the time commitment, I think, as our public speaker noted, there is some work to do about actually making better use of the website and more communication around allotments, so that there is that openness and transparency about what's happening with the service and how things work. I was about to go to Councillor Scott, but he seems to have temporarily disappeared from his chair. Do you want to come back on that, Fenella?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I completely agree. Pitchcroft and Waterworks Road, it's very sad. I've been down there and visited those sites myself, and I'm amazed at the resilience of the tenants that we have there. And it seems that there's a big clear up every time we have a flood. So certainly, yes, we can take that away and review how many times they get flooded and liaise with the site coordinators in more detail. I too am very surprised that we have a waiting list for those sites. So, resilient tenants. With regard to your second question or comment regarding the waiting lists and vacancies and how the two don't tally, just thought I would take the opportunity to update councillors in that we have Actually, as a result of the vacancies at Windsor Avenue, we have reviewed how we can offer vacant plots for two potential tenants, and we now give tenants the opportunity, or potential tenants rather, the opportunity to choose one or two sites, so they can have a second preference. This wasn't the case before, and that's sometimes why the numbers look a bit strange on the website. And they are updated weekly now, those figures, and that actually there's been quite a bit of movement since this report was prepared in the right direction. I'm pleased to say. We are going to be looking at the allotment pages for on the website, because I agree we can make them warmer and more welcoming to such the positive contribution that allotments make within the city. And we're reviewing those. We're starting with having a quarterly highlight, and we have spoken with the site coordinators, and we're giving site coordinators an opportunity to do an introduction to that highlight. So it starts to become very people friendly and warmer to potential tenants and to existing tenants. So I would say watch this space. So we are reviewing the pages on the website, and within the next quarter there will be changes. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Windsor Avenue, it's got the lightest, most easily workable soil in the city as far as I'm concerned, and it's a shame it's not fully occupied. I'm sure it will be. My second question was about new allotments, and given that the overall planning policy for the area do require that allotment spaces be identified as part of new developments, have we yet seen any new allotments developed for the latest phase of housing development?
Chair, I think we need to come back on that one, but I'm not aware we have. But you know, rather than me double guess, we can come back and confirm for all members whether we have or not.
Well, let me put in a plea for it, because densities of modern housing is such that the space for growing anything in new back gardens is really remote, and the SWDP does have policies about allotments being created. Let's make sure as a council and as a community we pursue this, please.
Do we? I mean, I think Lloyd was made a commitment to come back to that and to liaise to find out the answer to that. Do we have anybody else with any questions around allotments? Councillor Mace.
It's just a very brief thank you on behalf of the Worcester Canal Group for the support in creating the bee-friendly allotment at Lansdowne Road. I know that's been a request, so thank you very much.
Do we have any other questions? If not, I think this item is to note the contents of the report, the proposed changes to the programme and management, including allotment site and plot inspections. We're looking to have a lot more information available going forward, which I think will be really helpful and go some way to addressing some of the concerns from residents. So if we don't have any other issues on that from members of the committee, we're going to move on to the next item and take that as noted, and we will look forward to the next update and also some updates in between committee meetings. So thank you. And then it's to you again about Ash Dieback.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I propose that to keep this brief as requested. So this report intends to bring members up to date with the delivery of the Ash Dieback Strategy and Action Plan 2024-27 and sets out key areas of work and associated expenditure proposed for 2025-26. During 2024-25, the focus for the delivery of the Ash Dieback Strategy and Action Plan has been to carry out visual inspections of the Council's ash trees to compare up-to-date assessments against existing data or partial data recorded in 2022-23. The review is ongoing and once complete will provide accurate information on the number of ash trees, their distribution, the severity of infection with Ash Dieback disease and its progression in the city. So far, All tree species in 76 of the Council's parks and green spaces have been visually inspected in 2024. This equates to 25% of the Council's sites. 7 trees have been identified to require remedial works on tree safety grounds. Using this figure as a guide, perhaps only 20 to 40 trees may require tree safety works across the Council's parks and green spaces. This may increase as the woodlands are inspected. Tree inspections will continue throughout 2025-26 to complete the remainder of the sites. The work to plot and zone prominent ash trees will be carried out in 2025. Plotting will map the location of ash trees, whilst zoning will record which trees could present a high risk to public safety. Public safety is the most important factor when managing ash dieback disease. Our approach reflects the latest guidance for management and control of ash dieback published on the Forest Research website. It's an interesting read if anybody has clicked on the link and had a look. It's interesting both in terms of the suggestions for how we approach ash dieback, but also what we can do as an authority and members of the public can do to try and reduce the spread of ash dieback. In April this year, we're going to have a new web page to actually include information on ash dieback, so to spread the word rather than the disease, to identify what measures we're taking, but also how people can help us with our tasks and to explain our approach. In 2024-25, the first year of the plan, we have used £10,000 to employ a suitably qualified member of agency staff to support the Council's tree team for a period of 12 weeks. This has enabled the team to carry out tree inspections while continuing to efficiently deliver high priority tree works. Storms have affected the planned works, and as we've mentioned earlier, an additional more than 400 staff hours have been required to make safe and clear any storm damage. Our tree team are working around that. It's proposed in 2025-26 we complete the tree inspections in the outstanding parks and green spaces, plot and zone all prominent ash trees, and identify and implement necessary tree works with ash dieback, and to communicate to raise awareness of ash dieback and its potential impact. It's proposed that £45,000 is utilised from the remaining £55,000 balance within the ash dieback reserve to continue to support the delivery of the plan. I'm happy to go into further detail on what that will include. So I ask that the committee note the contents of this report, and in particular the proposals to support the delivery of the ash dieback strategy and action plan during 2025-26. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. A much more positive picture than when we were looking at the gloomy prospects last year. So I think generally very positive. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report, this update. Really handy to see, and topic close to many people's hearts in one of the villages, especially where we have so many trees. First question is about, have we seen much change or any surprises in terms of resistance to ash dieback? Second one would be about the paragraph 314, the new web page, this communication, whether that could entail two-way communication such that members of the public could report trees of note, either through sickness or health, on that one. So basically, so that we can use our volunteers more. There's a lot of people keen. So that would be a handy thing, whether it's even just via an app or whichever way. I mean, I'm sure it'd be a fairly cost-effective way to help with the big task of mapping trees. And the final question about funding, do we have, so 3.23 paragraph, whether we have any indications of potential future pots of funding that may come either from government or where else, about how to fund the work we need to do on ash dieback, which is likely to increase at a time when our reserves are likely to be under even greater pressure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of resistance to ash dieback, we're at the early stages. We're only in year 1 of implementing our plan, so I'm afraid it's a bit early to say. The forest research that I mentioned earlier, that I suggest if you are interested that you have a look at, that they're encouraging us to continue to monitor to see if we can identify trees with resistance. But at this present moment, I haven't anything to report, but we hope, wouldn't it be wonderful if we have some trees in the city of Worcester that prove to be resistant. So that the initial work that we're doing of carrying out inspections, the mapping and the zoning of trees will help us to have that baseline of data, and it will also inform the regularity of inspections for the future. So trees in high risk zones will be inspected every year. So as we gather and start to build up the data, I hope that we'll be able to report something positive back in the future, but at the present moment in time, we're still in that data gathering stage. Your second question, with regard to two-way communication on ash dieback, I'm happy to take an action back to our comms manager and speak to him to see whether or not that's something that would be practical for us. At the moment, because we had a bit of disparity between the information gathered previously and the information that we're currently gathering with our tree team, I'm keen that our tree team take the lead on it so that we know that we've got this baseline data, but perhaps it might be something for the ongoing monitoring that might be useful. But I'm happy to take that one back and speak to both the tree officer and our comms manager and see what the opportunities might be.
Can I just cut in and add something to there, that there is a provision at the moment for that two-way communication. You can actually, there's a tree section on the Report It app. I'm very excited on that because it went out in a press release last week with my name on it and with a quote against my name. And when I signed it off, I was very clear. Can you just double check that you can actually report trees this way? The appeal at that was to say if you see an ash tree that's because safety first, you can report it, but there's no reason why people couldn't use that facility to report other information which will then get shared with the tree team. So while Fenella will go back and look at something that may be a longer term project, there is an opportunity now, and we've double checked that is up and working and operational, so that if members of the public have information about trees, click on the trees on the Report It app and it will go through to the tree team.
You're absolutely right, Zoe. Thank you, Chair. And the final query with regard to funding for 26-27, it's a difficult one at the moment because we don't know what is going to be required until we've done this initial information gathering, that's inspecting the trees, actually identify what zone they're in terms of risk and plotting them. So it's at the moment, it's not possible for me to say what we will need in terms of expenditure, but I think that there is a risk that we will need some future budget for carrying out any works that are required as a result of ash dieback. In terms of pots of money, I'm afraid that one I think we'll need to take away from this meeting and see what might be available. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. Fernando, can I just clarify? I read it and then I read it again. I'm still a little bit confused. When you talk about the plotting and the zoning, are you saying that some has already been done and some remedial work has been done on those that are whatever category 1 in the zoning bit, or that you're really starting from scratch and you need to do the whole thing from the beginning? Thank you.
So in terms of the plotting and zoning, that hasn't been carried out yet. So it's the inspections, the visual inspections that have been carried out. And in terms of any works to trees, it's been more reactive from the original data that was collected. If a tree was identified to require works, then those trees have been re-inspected to see whether those works are actually required now, and then the works carried out. The plotting and the zoning is something that we'd like to carry out this coming financial year. And then that will then identify the level of risk, the location and any works required, and then the level of inspections for the future. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on the report? If not, I'd just like to thank you for a comprehensive report, and I think it's really good for us as a committee to note the positive direction of travel, but also the recognition that there may be future requirements. And I know that in the medium-term financial plan, you are aware that officers are aware of the need to, that we're going to be coming back about that. So are everybody happy to note that report? Yep, good, excellent. We're going to move on, and I would like to thank everybody for keeping their comments succinct, because actually we've got to 8:15 and we're on the last item on the agenda. So it's over to Lloyd.
No pressure. Chair, now that government have clarified that having domestic food waste collections in by March 26 is their will, and that's been legislated for, we as a council now need to get our skates on and get moving on putting that service in. The commission piece of work from Tetra Tech has been completed. That's at Appendix 1, and apologies for the delay in providing that to members. But that sets out what our food waste service for Worcester City Council will look like. I won't go through all the bullet points. I'm sure members have read it. There will obviously be a capital cost and a revenue cost associated with delivering that service. The focus of tonight's report is on capital, and in particular on food waste trucks. The service that we've been advised that we need will need to operate with 7 trucks, 6 operational trucks and 1 spare. The DEFRA grant funding that we've been provided with, that will need to pay for food caddies, both inside and outside, communal bins and food waste trucks. But there is a shortfall on that capital funding. We appealed that. We were provided with more funding, but there is still a shortfall. Fortunately, in the last couple of weeks, we've also had provision around extended producer responsibility. So we've had £990,000 of funding relating to that. And although P&R committee have approved that going into a service transformation reserve, I think Sal in his reports and me at every opportunity, we are suggesting that as much of that is kept as free as possible to support the delivery of not just implementing the food waste service, but also to make improvements to the waste and recycling service in general, because any future EPR payments are going to be based on what our recycling rates are and the quality of our recyclate. But getting back to food waste trucks, we need 7. The report this evening is recommending that we use all of our DEFRA capital grant allocation to procure those trucks, because it's important we get in and we get in as early as possible. The Tetra Tech report is saying that we need to give ourselves 15 months to implement the service. So that takes us beyond the March 2026 implementation date. So we will need to notify DEFRA of our intentions, but actually procuring trucks now, when we know there are lead-in times of 12 months, and we want to try and secure ourselves the best price possible, it's important that we go now, we go quickly. So, as I say, our intention is to use the capital grant from DEFRA to procure those trucks, which will leave a balance of £170,000. And we'll then come back in March with a procurement strategy for food caddies and bins. There will be a shortfall on that, and therefore, just warming members up, we will be asking for that to be funded from the balance on the DEFRA capital grant, and also to take some from the transformation reserve, which is where the extended responsibility funding has gone. So, Chair, it's probably easy for me to get into too much detail on this one. I'm sure members have read it. I'm sure there'll be questions, and happy to take those.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to getting better recycling, and I think everybody around this table will be. But I'm a plastic adverse person, so I was wondering, are these caddies and curves, how much are they recycled themselves? Are they recycled items that are being used, or are we talking about virgin plastic that's going to be made?
Chair, again, we can provide some more detail on that. I would have thought, given the nature of them and the nature of the industry they're in, they would be recycled plastic. But again, don't quote me. We can see clarification. And again, we would need to go through a tender process for that, whether that be a direct reward or a procurement process. And I'm sure that will be built into the process.
So, useful feedback to officers for when they bring that report on caddies forward to us in March. Okay, I've got Councillor Mace, then Councillor Cross, then Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report. I think the approach we're taking is extremely pragmatic and the right way to be going. I did note in the Page 20 of the report, the household waste per person in Worcester, we're at 303.3 kilograms, which is quite a lot per person, but for all the other bodies listed in the report, it's, I think, the second lowest. I don't know if that's been a deliberate action that we've ended up in that position, but that's, you know, something to be commended. Now I understand that the capital grants we've been given wouldn't cover electric trucks, and additionally that they wouldn't have had the range to reach the aerobic digester in Gloucestershire. I guess my question is, you know, it's disappointing we're not going to get electric trucks as we are in an air quality management area, but are there any other aerobic digesters closer than the one that the County Council has selected?
There is a site close to the one that's been suggested, which is, I think, is in the Wychavon patch. But we are at the behest of the County Council as the Waste Disposal Authority. They will negotiate access to an anaerobic digester. That's where we've been directed at the moment. We have sought sort of advice on why the other site wasn't accessible, and it may be due to the nature of the material that's currently taken. It may not be suitable for household food waste, more sort of agricultural food waste. So there is a technical reason for that.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly disheartened to read I mean, great report and, you know, very necessary steps being taken. Disheartened to hear in paragraph 238 that our county council seems to be not being helpful, in that we are being directed to Gloucestershire, big round trip, £25,000 extra cost, you know, operational cost. I'd be happy to take this forward to our county council as a county councillor, and you know, basically let me help you in as much as I can, because the desire is very much there, and hopefully we'll try to get some changes. But it seems that we're being a little bit pushed into a corner and having to bear an unfair cost in this particular item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and again, we've kept Chair and Vice Chair briefed on this, and we've kept the council leader briefed on it. We will continue to communicate with officers, and that will hopefully bring about a resolution. But yeah, any soft nudging councillors could do, that would be greatly appreciated.
So we'll leave you to be lobbying the County Council then, as a member of the County Council. Andrew.
Happy to. I mean, there might be questions about green waste coming up in our next county council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do a lot of composting at home, but as someone who has children who invariably don't eat all their food, this is really useful. It's, you know, the cooked food waste, so really welcome this report. I'd like to pick up on 3.2.16, which is about the bottle return scheme. In 2017, I visited the Netherlands, and there was a bottle deposit scheme there, as in many countries in Europe. It feels like we're living in the past. It's very disappointing that this government are saying it will only be live in October 2027, and it will not include glass. As we know from our street scene reports that broken glass is a problem in the area, so it's just such a shame that glass and the implications of broken glass has in terms of safety is not being recycled, because that would be a driver to have less glass on the streets. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's now to Councillor Scott.
Thank you very much. You answered a number of my questions by email. Thank you very much, Lloyd. It just struck me that the methodology of collecting, and particularly how it applies to communal properties, and I'm thinking about the quite large number of apartment blocks and flats in parts of Diglis area of Cathedral Ward. So is it that every house, just to confirm, every household will be given a small kitchen, sink side bin with a removable liner, and they'll be able to take that to an outside receptacle, which will be collected by the bin men. Sorry, not bin men, our operatives.
That's correct.
Sorry. And how would it work in terms of the communal ones? That I couldn't quite clarify in terms of that from the numbers. How many are you thinking about doing?
I think from memory, we've got around 6,500 communal households. So again, without going into too much detail, we will purchase enough bins. So on average, every 3 or 4 households is served by a communal bin. But as you say, every household will receive an internal food waste caddy, so they can take that outside into a communal bin and tip off.
Right, thank you. Well, let's hope we can get on with it. I think, is it a third of all waste stream is compostable food? Is that right at the moment?
Again, to top of my head, I couldn't quite tell you, but
might even be more, I think.
32%.
So clearly this indicates we're going to have quite an interesting discussion in March, because there's a lot of interest in how the logistics of this work and food caddies and the practicalities. But this evening's decision is around the use of funding to purchase trucks. We're being asked to note the contents of these reports, note the fact that there is going to be a capital shortfall. And what we need to do is decide, are we happy to recommend to Policy and Resources Committee the use of the DEFRA and Capital New Burdens funding, a capital expenditure of £735,000 to procure 7 new waste vehicles. So I think that's the point. That anybody else want to comment on that before we move to the vote? Councillor Lewin.
I'd just like to promote, Chair, that I'm very happy to support this. I'd like to thank the officers for the work. But I would like it noted that we are extremely disappointed that we don't have electric vehicles being procured, because we are in an air quality management area. So I would really like that taken back and some feedback done somehow through something, please. Thank you.
So I think that's noted. That I don't know whether Lloyd, you want to come back on that? Yeah,
and again, not to put words into Councillor Lewin's, but I presume that's to DEFRA, the feedback.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
We'll feed back to DEFRA and to the County Council about the issues that of electric vehicles. In the meantime, we are not looking to purchase electric vehicles, but are we happy as a committee to recommend to Policy and Resources the use of this DEFRA money? All those in favour, if you please raise your hand. That's unanimous. And then that being unanimous, are we happy to delegate to the Corporate Director, Operations, Homes and Communities, such a good snazzy title, to Lloyd, in consultation with Karen and myself, the contract for that? All those in favour again? Again, that's unanimous, and I think we've already made it very clear that we understand that there will be a deficit of the budget, that we will therefore be having a follow-up discussion in March around the procurement of the waste bins caddies, an update about what's happening with the funding. And I think this conversation today has been useful in giving officers a clear steer of some of the issues that are likely to come up that we need to be covering in that report. If members do have other issues of concerns they really want, now is the time, not in this meeting, but via email afterwards, to raise those concerns to make sure that we do get those covered in the March report. And then I'm going to conclude by saying thank you to officers and to all members here, that this was a huge, hefty agenda that I was expecting to be here half the evening to go through, and we've actually been through the entire agenda, had, I think, a meaningful discussion. We've had public participation, and we're finishing by 8:30. I think that's very impressive. Thank you.